glad to be here. I was the first president of ACM India in 2010, and the very first ACM India annual event was conducted in Bangalore in 2010. And from all the people here, I only see Anand Deshpande sitting there. He was part of the co-chair of the ACM India Council in the beginning. And in the first ACM India event, you were a speaker, Professor Raj Reddy, Barbara Liskov, and Tony Hoare. We had 3 Turing Award winners as speakers in that event in Bangalore. After that, the second one was held here in Hyderabad. Then this next time is coming around to Hyderabad is 2026. So I'm glad to be here and pleased to be hosting this conversation. Professor Reddy, I will ask you a few questions about how you got into where you are right now, starting with, you were born in Madras Presidency of British India in a village near Tirupati, not too far from here. And you came of age, or the youth of the first decade of independent India. What were the aspirations? What were the thinking in their mind? How did you end up doing engineering? Today, everybody and their brother, everybody wants to do engineering in India. But what was it like those days? How did you end up in Gandhi Engineering College doing engineering, coming from a village in Andhra Pradesh?
Purely luck. Being in the right place at the right time. I grew up in a little village about 60 miles from Chennai, Madras. And and those days it was called SSLC, you went up to 11th grade. I went to a local school in Kalahasti, and that turned out to be the first step. Fortunately, I got first class in the SSLC, got into Loyola College, did my pre-university intermediate, it used to be called, and then joined Gandhi Engineering College. Primarily, at that time, it was interesting. There was a split. In 1953, the Madras Presidency was split into Tamil Nadu and Andhra Pradesh. So I was from Andhra Pradesh, and I was not allowed to go to Gandhi Engineering College. But as had happened, my ancestors had land in all the 3 districts, Nellore, Chittoor, and Chengalpat. And so I was able to claim Chengalpat nativity and go to... So all these things happen. You don't have any control on any of these things. It's purely a matter of luck.
Right. And after your bachelor's, you went on to get a master's in Australia. That must have been even rarer those days. How did that happen? And was computer in the life of any of the technologists those days? Or
right.
The computers were there. You probably heard of computers in late 50s or mid 50s. But was computer in the imagination of engineers or technologists of those days?
So I was a civil engineer when I graduated from Gandhi Engineering College. And at that time, they had Commonwealth fellowships or internships. And 3 of us who graduated from there thought it would be good fun to go for a year or 2, which is what we did. And from there, after a year of internship, I joined the local University of New South Wales that was just being formed. And they just got a new computer. It was called English Electric Juice Mark II, which was a huge computer the size of this platform. And it was all vacuum tubes. This was in 1958-59. So the bottom line was, when I started my graduate school in the University of New South Wales, my advisor said, I'm going to the computer center to do some structural analysis, why don't you come along? So I went, and he was programming, and he kind of thought aloud what he was doing, and I was just looking over his shoulder. After a week or so of doing that, he said, now you know enough, why don't you go and do the programming for me? I became his programmer, and that's how I got into computers. And after I graduated, I decided not to continue with structural engineering and civil engineering, and joined IBM World Trade in Australia and worked there for a few years, 3 years. And I always wanted to do a PhD, but it was not clear where I would do it. So at that time, I wanted to do AI. So the question was, where should I go? There were only 3 places, MIT, Carnegie Mellon, and Stanford. There were 4 founding fathers of AI, Marvin Minsky at MIT, Alan Newell and Herb Simon at Carnegie Mellon, and John McCarthy at Stanford. So I was admitted to Stanford and went there and became, at that point in 1963 it was, there was no computer science department. The idea of concept of computer science was just being thought about, and the first computer science departments emerged in end of 1964. So both Stanford and Carnegie Mellon set up computer science departments in 65. And MIT and Berkeley said there's no need for a computer science department, we'll do it all in electrical engineering. It's part of electrical engineering. And so they stayed as EECS for a long time. Even in 1973, there was a thing called laboratory,
Lincoln Laboratory.
Not Lincoln Lab. There was an MIT thing, and which ultimately became CSAIL, Computer Science and AI Labs of MIT. But in 1963 was the first time major funding for AI was provided. I happened to land in Stanford exactly at that time in 1963 as a graduate student. And we had funding from DARPA at MIT, Carnegie Mellon, and Stanford. So I happened to be one of the the first PhD student in AI from Stanford. And the department was only formed in 65, and I finished my PhD in early 1966, and then joined Stanford faculty as an assistant professor.
So you worked with the fourth father, which is John McCarthy. You didn't mention the name. Yeah. So how was it to work with John McCarthy, and why did you pick speech recognition as your problem? And what were the problems, big problems of AI? How was AI looked at those days by these pioneers, early pioneers?
Right. So there was only one AI faculty member there, that was John McCarthy. So since they admitted me as an AI student, I was working with him. And we got the first funding, and as a result, we had a brand new PDP-1 computer. It was had a cycle time, I think, of 5 microseconds or so, and but it was the first computer which was not run by a computer center. In the old days, every university had a computer center. They had a major computer, and everybody did their computing programming in punch cards and typed up their program and submitted it. And then you get an answer back after a few hours or a day. And that was the process of how you wrote your programs. And I had already worked on those kind of computers at IBM Australia. The first 2 small computers, IBM 1401 and 1620, they were the first transistor computers. Before that, it was all vacuum tubes. And we had PDP-1, and as luck would have it, most computers are just computation only, symbolic. And this one, because it was designed as a laboratory computer, also had a display and a keyboard and an A to D converter, analog to digital converter. So John McCarthy said, we have this computer, there's an A to D converter, why don't you see, you can speak into it and see why don't you see what you can do with speech? And that's how I got into speech in 1963. And it was quite an experience. Basically, having come up from India and Indian, what now I know as Panini grammars, the amazing thing about our early linguists in India is they understood the structure of language. They understood the symbols, the vowels and consonants, and how they should be organized, how you can communicate. And I learned about Panini by reading about Jacobson, MIT, professor in linguistics, after I got there. But so it felt natural to me to build, instead of building English language things, I said, let us see if we can just recognize vowels, e, u, or whatever. And that's how I started. And only after a few years, we started doing digits and 1,000-word vocabularies and so on.
Yeah, so it's interesting. You noted 4 names of founders of AI. They all got Turing Awards in maybe 70s.
Right.
After that, ACM gave a Turing Award to so-called AI researchers over 94 when you and Ed Feigenbaum got them.
Right.
And then there were many more years of no AI. Now you're seeing a lot of AI people getting Turing Awards.
Right.
Like
The
Hinton and
latest
team.
ones
And,
are,
Okay. So, this ASR problem, these days AI is so big. Was speech recognition thought to be a hard problem, or we hear these anecdotes from those days, it'll be solved in a few months? It was thought of as an easy problem that just need to be put some time and some student hours into it, or it was recognized that it's a hard problem, it'll take 40 years to solve, or 50 years?
It was not seen as an easy problem, but we had this optimism. No matter what problem was there, we said AI, we can solve them. So when Stanford AI Labs was set up in '65, in the hills of Stanford Hills, we were working on all the topics: speech, vision, language, robotics. We had Roger Schank working in language. We had Jerry Feldman and others working in vision, and there were other strong people in AI, in robotics. So I was one of the faculty members, or by that time, who was working in it. And there was no idea that it's going to be a hard problem. And many of us thought we'll solve it in a few years, maybe 5, 10. And I remember people making projections, like John McCarthy, Herb Simon said, we should have a world champion chess machine in 10 years. That was about 1968 is what his projection was. We didn't have a world champion chess machine in 1968, but we had one in 1997. It took 4 times longer than we thought. And even for things like speech, it has taken about 4 or 5 times longer, maybe. Right now, the first autonomous driving car we demonstrated at Carnegie Mellon in the Robotics Institute in 1993, where we had a car driving from Washington, D.C. to San Diego. It was called No Hands Across America. And we demonstrated it, and I went with Red Whitaker to General Motors and said, hey, the technology is here, we'll give it to you, do something. And they said, don't tell us anything you're doing because we're also doing something. But we said, okay. But it turned out it was another 10 years later, they funded CMU to do the Grand Challenge, DARPA Grand Challenge. But at that time, in 2006 and 7, we were able to demonstrate a DARPA Grand Challenge vehicle could go in uncharted terrain from 120, several tens of kilometers, I forget the exact number. It was called the first Grand Challenge. It was won by Sebastian Thrun and Stanford team. As luck would have it, Sebastian spent the first 10 years of his robotics life at CMU and just went to Stanford. And we had two, the number 1 and number 2 were CMU Stanford CMU, but they all have CMU DNA. It were all we were working on those autonomous vehicles from 1984. So when we finally demonstrated it, it was very clear the technology is there and can be done. And now, after all this time, we still don't have cars that are driving autonomously. There are some, Waymo and a few, and that's mainly has nothing to do with technology. It's all to do with liability and societal acceptance. When an autonomous vehicle has one accident, it becomes a big news. What they forget is 40,000 people die every year in car accidents, and the number of, even in India, it's very bad. It's like 200,000 people die every year. And the repair costs of the accidents of the cars is in billions of dollars. In the US alone, it's like $45 billion. I don't know what it is in India, but so the issue would be, if I were making the rules, I would simply insist every car should be autonomous immediately, and you can still have a driver in the driver's seat, and when they get confused, they can beep. But most of the time, right now the technology is very good that 99.9% of the time, it'll be perfect. And they've actually done studies on the human driving, autonomous driving is 91% less accidents than human driving. Already, they've measured it, Google and Waymo and so on. And but the benefits are there, but the society is not yet ready. And that's what happened. So when people say AI is going to take over the world, we're going to lose all the jobs, that's not going to happen immediately. It'll take time, mainly because of social inertia. The governments don't move that fast, and people don't move that fast.
So, in the major perception problem, vision, language, speech, do you think the speech understanding problem is a solved problem now? There's a huge progress in the last 15 years in all the perception problem.
They're all solved up to a point. Even human beings are not perfect in speech or vision. They make mistakes in listening. That same is true for vision and language. And the problems are largely solved. And the way you can measure it, they've been measuring them, they're doing benchmarking on all the LLMs and the latest foundation models. And what I'm kind of surprised to see is the foundation models, they kind of are getting A grades in AP exams, advanced placement exams of high school. If you pass the exam, then you're given waiver in the college. You don't have to do that subject again. And there are 38 such subjects. College board conducts exams every year. And all the math, science, physics subjects, these models are getting A grade. They take exactly the same test as students, and they get A grade. In English and a few other subjects like history, they get a B grade. There are some, for other arcane subjects for which there's not enough data to be trained, they're getting fail in a C grade, like 50%. But what they were saying is, these AI assistants, they're passing all the exams for advanced placement. It's just that whether they're getting an A, a B, or a C, depending on the thing. And given that, I would say they're there already, but it's just like when you give a grade to a student, you give them A, B, or C, all that you're saying is, you know enough about the subject, but not all you need to know. So, you know, I've always asked this question, when you pass somebody with a 50% or a 35% grade, that means you're saying you don't need to know the rest of the subject and still pass. 65% of the subject you don't have to know. With 35% you can pass. Why don't you just teach me the 35% and require me to get an A grade, 100%, and not waste all the time on the rest of the subjects? And why do you define the syllabus, huge syllabus? You know, if you look at the NCERT syllabuses, and if you only need to know 35%, me to know 35% to get past the next subject, you should just let me learn that subject. You know, so I think there's no such thing as either you know the subject or you don't know the subject. You can't say 35%. There's a saying, either you're pregnant or you're not pregnant. Right? You can't be partial pregnant. So that's the problem with what we have. So there is no such, we don't have a perfect educational system. And when we get there.
So in AI, the methods of AI seen different paradigm shifts. One, you know, now we have the deep learning era, but before that, the statistical machine learning era was very dominant, and I think you and your students were pioneered it. There was a story about Kai-Fu Lee, who developed Sphinx system in maybe late 80s. Against the conventional wisdom of those days, he wanted to do the machine learning, statistical machine learning based speech. And I think he says you allowed him to do that, you treated him like vice president rather than a grad student. Do you have any comments on that? Yeah.
So
in his book he says that. Yeah.
When you have a PhD student, you know, people at that level, there's no reason to think you know the right answer. And I assumed, you know, that if somebody had, you know, I was fairly reasonably open. Even if I had a lot of undergraduates working with me too, it was an open, you know, they could make any comment they want, and we would, in the group meetings, we would kind of take it at face value and see, but we never rejected just because it was an undergraduate or graduate. It's not as though only faculty members, professors have all the right ideas. So when Kai-Fu Lee came back after a summer internship and said, I want to try this other thing, I said, sure. You know, I'm not sure you're going to succeed, but you can try it.
So in the last few years, I mean 3-4 years, AI has become generative AI.
Right.
Everybody thinks of it as generative AI, this foundation model, large language model, etc. Right. Away from the classical AI of maybe discriminative or analytical AI. So what is the difference between, in your view, what is the difference between the classical discriminative analytical recognition-based system and the modern generative AI?
Right. So there is a book called Thinking Fast and Thinking Slow. And this was a Nobel Prize winning authors from Israel who said human beings engage in two kinds of problem solving or thinking. Many times they just instinctively know the right answer. When you see a person, for example, you know who that person is. You don't think about it. And so the current systems operate in both of those modes. 80–90% of the time, they just recognize it. And that means then there's no thinking going on. And those are the generative models where you show some input and they generate the output saying, this is Taj Mahal or this is so-and-so person. But there are some problems in which you cannot. The simplest problem I know that requires reasoning and thinking is if I give you a list of 10 numbers and say sort them, there is no obvious answer of how to sort them unless you just to figure out the numbers and mentally sort them, and it requires time. It's not a recognition problem, it's a problem solving issue. And that's where even the current models are now having to add the reasoning component. You can't just generate an answer because the answer is not there. It is just, and so I think we are emerging into problem solving is something that AI people have studied for a long time. Newell and Simon, because they were mostly in symbolic AI, not looking at speech or vision or robotics, they said, how does a person reason? How does a person play chess? How does a person prove a theorem? How does a person exhibit intelligence? Even Turing, in his paper on intelligence, said, proving theorems and for him, speech, vision, and robotics was not a problem. So as it turned out, although what is easy for human beings is much harder for computers. And this is the Hans Moravec, who's a professor at CMU, is called Moravec paradox. What is easy for people to do, computers have a lot of difficulty. What's hard for people to do, like proving theorems or playing chess, computers can do much faster. So I think it is not just generative AI, it's combination.
So there's also a fear about the latest AI tools have become so capable that many of the entry-level jobs that deal with data manipulation will be done by automated agents or AI systems very soon. And even more, these systems have become very good at coding. Right. And there is, just last week, the couple of systems were released by Claude and OpenAI, and the stock market got hit by that apparently. So what should today's college student who was graduating in 2026 or 2027, what do they have to, do they fear this? How do they cope with this potential of their jobs, today's jobs getting disrupted so badly by these tools?
The job market will be disrupted. Already, that's not the issue. The question is, what should we be teaching our students? Or even if I'm an adult, I'm in the job market, what should I be doing or learning? And the key is turning out to be when these model generator program, they're not perfect. They're wrong sometimes. And sometimes they're, So what we need to do is teach our human students and human workers to think critically, to evaluate and and check to see if the answer that they're projecting is wrong. So if you get a Python program, you need to be able to say it's right or wrong. How are you going to do that if you're not being taught? So in general, people will be doing slightly different type of programming or pseudo programming, but the most important part of it is for us to teach them critical thinking. For example, letting them continuously, whenever they see an answer from your AI assistant, you say, I don't believe it. Prove to me that that's right. I think there's an error. You only say that if you are not sure that the answer that you're looking at is incorrect, or not sure at least. And the question is, how do you say that? When I read a newspaper, I see somebody making some claim or something, and many times I say, that doesn't make sense. I don't think it's right. Politicians always make ambiguous statements, and these statements are not always right, but they're self-serving sometimes. And you need to understand, have a grain of skepticism of what is wrong with that particular statement. How do you get that? How do you get that common sense intuition to be able to do that? And so we need to train people to kind of not always be negative, but be cautious and say, either you believe the statement or not. If you don't believe the statement, or if you don't believe the program, or if you don't believe whatever is being suggested, then you have to learn how to challenge. One of the things we do, we find we don't do in India, but is not uncommon in the USA, is even say a student in a classroom will challenge the professor, saying, I don't understand what you're saying. And here, we almost never say anything, especially if you're a girl student. You never even open your voice, for a whole year. You sit in the class, go through, and never say a thing. We have to change that mindset. We have to make it okay for people to talk, to ask questions, and there should not be any stigma about it. And also it should be okay to be wrong. You can say something, and maybe you're plainly wrong. That's okay. Not everybody is perfect all the time, and so we need to get into this new mindset, and that's what will kind of become important in this AI-enabled world.
This modern AI is also very resource intensive.
Yes.
They're consuming huge amount of power, compute, which and resulting in new nuclear plant being opened and that level of change. And there's also data. If the current models have to become an order or two more capable, where are we going to get the data from? Especially in the context of, say, India, where the digital data of Indian languages or Indian mores, customs, cultures is scarce. So how, is this, Yanis talked about ACM getting involved in SDGs and sustainability. Are our activity in AI, as AI community, our activity is worsening the problem? Are we part of the problem rather than the solution?
Right. So there are two issues you raised.
Yes.
One is the data.
Yeah.
The other one is large language models requiring huge amount of energy. Let me deal with the data first. In India, we have 1.4 billion people. We are creating a lot of data. And right now, that data is going into private archives like Google or WhatsApp, and so we need to have a regulation saying that data that's being collected is private, but there should be an opt-in provision for individuals to let their data be used for both public and private uses. And for that they should be compensated. I should get at least 1 year of free phone service in order for you to use all my data. So anyway, I believe with appropriate regulation and legislation, we'll have enormous amount of data. We don't need other people's data because what we are trying to do is create models that are relevant to India. And so the other problem of creating foundation models that are huge and knows everything about everything is too expensive. As you might have read, the last year's or this year's projected investment in AI model building is over $1 trillion. That is 10 to the $12 or 10 to the 14 rupees. So if we say 10 to the 7 rupees is 1 crore, we have 10 to the 1 crore rupees. 10 to the 7. That's a huge amount. We just cannot afford it. Maybe we can at some future time when we become number 2 economy. But right now, we are in a situation where we should pick and choose. Many of these models are open. They're being created from, and like DeepSeek model is open. So we should adopt one of them or 2 or 3 of them or even have partnerships with Google and Meta and say, we will give you our data in return for your models. And then there's a second step they create called fine-tuning, right? Whereby domain-specific or task-specific knowledge can be used to train the weights of the previously fully trained foundation models. That's what we should specialize in. In particular, there's a whole area called Edge AI, but it's basically most of the systems using AI will be either on your phones or in your cars or in your farm or whatever. At that point, they don't have all the foundation model in your phone. The foundation models currently are about 10 to the 20 kilobytes of memory. And if you look at these Apple AI models, they're only like 10 to the 10. So we are off by a factor of 10 to the 10. And we don't need all of that. And when you specialize using the process called distillation and compression, you can get that 10 to the 20 down to 10 to the 15 or 10 to the 14. Even that is too big to fit in a personal AI assistant. And so the question will be, how do you fine-tune this 10 to the 14 model, which they're not world-specific, they're not even India-specific, they're your region-specific. If you speak Telugu, then those are the models that will be enhanced. But more importantly, these 10 to the 14 model going down from 10 to the 10, I think the size of the personal AI models at the edge will be like not 10 to the 10, it'll be 10 to the 12 in the next few years. Already you can do 10 to the 12, but it's like very expensive, maybe not $1,000 phone. And so we need to get to that stage where you not only reduce the size of the model, but also increase the capacity of your personal assistant. At that point, you will have what they call a sovereign AI. It's kind of self-contained AI, which does not require any cloud-based interaction. That's where we are going, and that's where we should be spending all our time on, namely, how do we get AI to every person in the country, not just a few people that can afford huge computation models. And those are the ones, so somehow we should concentrate India's investment in AI to problems that will immediately help our citizens, especially the poor and the illiterate in villages. Even if you're an illiterate person, you can still benefit from it because you don't even have to know how to read or write. All you need to know is to be able to speak. Once you give them the literacy saying there's an assistant on your phone, all you have to do is press the phone and talk to it. It will give you an answer. And that realization is the most important thing we need to get to every person. How do they know what they can do? Right now, we don't know what is possible. Sorry, I'm going up. So, I'm done. Go ahead.
So, I think my next question about what should India do, focus on, you already answered. So my last question is on, now there is a lot of talk of physical intelligence, this big push that we got, development that happened in language, vision, speech, etc., translating into robotics and physical space. As you pioneered and started the Robotics Institute. How do you see the development in physical robotics coming up in the next few years?
I think that's going to be wonderful. Basically, already both in China and USA, humanoid robots are being developed. Currently, the cost of a humanoid robot is projected to be $20,000. $20,000 is what? 20 lakhs?
Yes, 20 lakhs.
Something like that. It's a lot of money for many people, but however, if the costs come down or you can rent them, you can use these humanoid robots because not only will they have physical capabilities like human beings, but they will also have the same intelligence that will be in your sovereign AI system. And so it'll have the knowledge. That means it can, for example, when you graduate from IIT here, you get a degree, B.Tech, and then you get hired. If I have an intelligent assistant which can answer the same exam questions and get an A grade, can that assistant with me together be given the same job, right? And what we are now looking for is a way to imagine a world in which human beings and humanoid robots can work together. And everybody some people will say robots will take over and will become slaves. I don't think so, but here is a good example. I come from a little village, and people are getting monthly subsidy, 1,000 rupees or something. They don't want to work. They say, how come you can sit in your big palace and have air-conditioned room and work, and you want me to go work in the field in the hot sun? Why should I do that? And so they're refusing to work, okay? So if robots will be our solution, if we can create robotic assistants which are cheap enough that people can rent, and most of the work will be done by them. And so the current prediction is society will be able to produce 10 times of food and agriculture. Our productivity will increase by a factor of 10. That means with the same population, we're producing 10 times more goods and services. And that means people will be able to the phrase is, we will go from a world of scarcity to the world of plenty. Everybody will have so much. You don't have to work. and all the food you need and everything will be there. Even if you don't want to work, you'll still be able to afford it because you'll get the minimum payment from the government, UBI. And so that's where we are heading towards. I am not at all worried about it. I think it's a good thing.
Let's hope the political system will support it.
They won't until they figure out the economics of it. How can we provide, how can people not work at all and still have all the food and all the things that they want?
Okay.
Then work becomes optional. If I want to work, I can work. If I don't want to work, I'll sit and watch TV or go to the beach. That's the way it will be. I call it Maharaja model. In the old days, Maharajas didn't work. They had hundreds of servants. Even now, King of England, King Charles, has 493 servants. And he has 7 palaces, and they're all distributed in there. And he is not taking care of most of the things. His servants are doing it. So if he can be a Maharaja and King Charles, and we had our Maharajas, why not have each of us be a Maharaja and sit there and then tell everybody else? So when I say this, people laugh and say, you're joking, But I think it is a point to consider, namely, when you have a world of abundance, lots of things, what is the role of human agency? How do we kind of conduct ourselves? What do we do? But it turns out there'll still be need for IITs, and because IITs represent less than 1%, 0.1% of all the children. They're the most brilliant people of our society. They will be needed. They will be used, but it may not be in what the fields we're teaching them in.
Okay. So, because we're running a little bit behind, we will stop here. Can we take 1 or 2 questions from the audience?
Sure.
Maybe 2 questions, since you're running. Somebody has to. There. Yeah, just come forward.
Oh.
Thank you so much. Okay, yeah.
Sir, my name is Sandeep. I'm building a graph database. I wanted to seek your opinion from both of you. What future do you see in AI-enabled or AI-native databases in the future? We are going in that direction. Wanted to know your views. There is still a lot of work to be done in databases. We don't have, for example, a native to India graph database or even a relational database. Wanted to get your opinions.
Yeah. Basically, the data science, of which structured databases are a very small part, the amount of unstructured data that's being collected is huge. And the current systems are able to monitor, take in all this unstructured data and make sense out of them. And that is where the future is. It's not just structured databases, but data and data science is going to be central to everything.
Right. Thank you.
Second? No, I don't have, I'm not.
Sir, I want to ask 2 questions, sir. One is, you missed about energy-related things, sir, in the previous question which you asked. And the other thing is, I wanted to know how finances would work, sir. It's like everybody becomes Maharaja. How would an economic system work? There has to be somebody who get a high pay, who get a low pay. So on what basis? Like right now, we are on education.
So imagine a population where there are humanoid robots which are 9 billion or 10 billion, and the human population, which is only 2 billion. It's supposed to come down from where we are now to 2 billion. So we still will have 10, 20 billion agents doing things, And some of them, they are creating value. They're working, they can work 24 hours a day, they can do all kinds of things. And so my assumption is the human beings in that new world will be like Maharajas. You know, if you think of even Chandragupta and Chanakya, Chandragupta may have been the king, emperor, but all the brains were in Chanakya. So the fact you may have intelligence elsewhere, you know, you have super intelligence in your pocket, Einstein in your pocket, that doesn't matter. You know, as long as you are able to tell the Einstein in your pocket, saying, hey, let's do this, and if what you're suggesting is stupid, it'll tell you, saying that's not going to work, we're going to get into trouble, let's not do that.
Last question, really, yeah.
That was an insightful discussion. Thank you. So, one or two piece of advice you would give to students who are not pursuing PhD in AI?
Not pursuing in AI. PhD not in AI, yeah.
Not in
Forget
AI.
about AI. I'm not saying AI is like reading and writing. You just need to know how to use it. And that will be taught in primary school and kindergarten. Every kindergarten student in the future will know how to use their smart assistant and say, how do I do this? I don't understand. It will kind of lead them through in education or whatever. So thinking somehow AI has to be, you know, a degree that you get and so on should be completely forgotten. You know, you don't get a degree in reading and writing. Everybody knows about it. That's all.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.